next 7 Caillou challenge is called Product Array Series number 5. They do have an introduction and warm-up if you want to check that out first, otherwise stay with me. Task: given an array list of integers, it'll be an array in our case, denoted by the square brackets. Construct a product array of same size such that prod at index I is equal to the product of all the elements of the input array except that original value at index I. So we'll go over some examples to make this clear. The array size will be at least 2. Numbers will only be positive, and repetition of numbers could occur. Fine. So they've got this simple, I don't know why they're using the curly braces there, but imagine the input 12 and 20. It returns the product of all the other values. So you start at the first index, it's 12, you ignore that, and then you take the 20. And so you're left with 20 in the first spot, and then for the second index, you ignore it and take the first one, and you get 12. But that's not so helpful. Let's do this second example. Consider an array with 1, 5, and 2. Now imagine you ignore the 1 and multiply the rest. 5 times 2 is 10. That's how you got 10 here. Now ignore the 5 and multiply the rest. You have 1 and 2. That makes 2. Now ignore the third element and multiply the other 2. 1 times 5 is 5. So I think you saw it there. And then you can go through the rest of these if you want and multiply them out and make sure that you understand. If you don't yet, make sure those values equal what you expect them to. They have an explanation here. And a more challenging version you can graduate to after you finish this one. So go ahead and try this one out. Pause the video. Give it an honest effort. Come on back when you're ready. I'm going to go over a couple solutions here. So I'm going to do kind of the straightforward thing first that I like to do. And then I'm going to show you a little bit better way that you could go about it. Now this first way is just going to basically, I'm just going to do exactly what they said to do, which in programming is often a good thing. But you've probably noticed from other challenges that people figure out clever ways to achieve the same result with less work. And so that's what I'm going to try to show with my second solution. But first things first, let's just do what they said to do. So I'm going to make an integer array. I'll call it products. I think they called theirs prod. You can use whatever name you like. I'm going to make a new integer array, and I'm going to size it the same as the input, just like they said, right? And then since I'm dealing with products, I'm going to be multiplying a bunch of values together. We clearly want to start with a base value of 1 and not the default integer value of 0. Because the problem is if you use 0 and you multiply anything by 0, you're going to keep getting 0. So let's go ahead and say array. Maybe this is new to you. You could say array fill. We give it our array and then what value you want to fill every entry with. If you weren't sure about that, you could go to the Microsoft document page and read about array fill. I don't know if they have examples in here, but it does what it sounds like it does. And you can even look at some of these overloads. You don't even have to do every element, right? You could just tell it where to start and how many of them you wanted to fill. So that could be useful for you as well. In my second solution, we'll just do it. We'll look at another way because this is about teaching and learning. So now we've got our products array all filled with 1s ready to multiply, right? So let's do some looping. For int I equals 0, I is less than array.length plus plus I. And, you know, I'm going to take that good advice people in feedback have been giving me. Let's blow this up a bit for your viewing pleasure. Okay, great. Nothing amazing there, right? Just a typical for loop. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a nested loop, right? Because for each one of these, we're going to go through and multiply all the other products. So let me do a little typing here. Obviously, we can't use the same name I within the same scope. That would be a conflict, right? So I'm going to call this inner index J. And so what we do here then is imagine we're going to start at 0, you know, the first element in the array, and then we'll just skip j when it's equal to I. And in that way, we'll hit everything else except for the current index. So I could say that in code. If j is not equal to I, then we're going to take products at position I, and we're going to multiply it times equals array at index j, right? This is our new collection that we're sort of building up by multiplying all the other values except for the current one we're on. The current index we're on is I. And so if j is also 0, let's say to start, you don't want to include that value, right? It's everything except that. So it'll miss one of these, and it will go up for all the other values in the array and multiply a bunch of numbers together based on how big the array is. And so that's going to make our products collection. Looks good. And then finally, when we're done, we can return the products. And that should have multiplied by everything. Now, I'm not saying this is the way you should do it or it's the best, but it's like coding out what they said, right? They said to go through and multiply each position by every other element. And so this is kind of a really straightforward way of achieving that. Kind of like translating the description into code directly. The name array does not exist in the current context. Well, what went wrong? I used array fill. It resides in the system namespace. Oftentimes in these challenges, they'll bring system in for you, but they did not here. So let's bring it in. I will run that. Green. And green. So you can be done here. Now, the thing that I don't like about this solution, well, it's easy to understand. It's easy to implement. It came right from the instructions. But look at this nested for loop, you know? Imagine the array was large. And so you can see that the running time isn't so good. We're basically looping over the collection n squared times, right? It's going to do it for every index. It's going to run a full, almost the full. I mean, it'll skip one. It'll still hit it, but it'll skip and it won't do a multiplication there. But it's going to run across the whole collection for every one of these, right? So if the array length was size 10, you know, you're basically looking at 100 operations there, right? You know, at index, the first index, it's going to process 10 times. Then I is going to go to the second index, and that's going to process 10 times. I is going to go to the third index, and that's going to process 10 times. And so you can see how I don't want to go through the collection that many times if I can be strategic about it. So let's see if we can be a little more strategic about it. Maybe I'll keep and we'll keep return products. We'll keep that. I used array fill to teach you that. Let's do it another way. We could say we want products filled with ones, right? So we could say int array products equals enumerable repeat, and then you tell it how many times you want to repeat. I may have it backwards. Let's say array length, and then you give it the value that you want repeated. I think I got those arguments in the right order, but if not, we will find out shortly, won't we? So yeah, this kind of achieves the same thing as array fill, but one little catch. First of all, better bring in system link if we're going to use enumerable methods, right? And then all these enumerable methods, or most of them, we typically know they return a collection of enumerable, which is just a generic collection. So we can't assign that to an integer array. That's a specific data collection there. So we know that enumerable additionally has a toArray method to get it back to make this jive. Everything matches up. Okay, so we're at the same point as the last solution. We've got an array filled with ones. I just wanted to show you two ways to do it. You can choose whatever you like. Okay, so how can we be strategic now? What I'm going to do then, when you think about it, or when I thought about it for this problem, I said, why don't I just calculate the product of all the values in the input array, just the total product, multiply them all together, you get some maybe large number. And then I'll go through the collection and I will divide each value by its value in the array. So let me show you how this could work. First, let's say int, I'll call it product total or something like that. And I'm going to use array, the aggregate method. And we've used this before. You give it a seed value, you give it your parameters. So I'll give it a variable name for each element in the array. I'll call it a factor. And then I give a variable name for the total, which is initialized to the seed value 1. So total will be 1 to start, and then we get to update it in the body of our lambda expression. So I could say total times equals factor. So it's going through, it's grabbing each element in the array, it's loading it into this factor variable, and then for each of those it runs this operation. It has total, which started at 1, and it's just multiplying it by the value it found, right? So you can kind of see aggregate's one of those different ones. It returns an integer value, or I should say in general whatever type you're working with. I'm working with integers here, so it's going to return an integer. And that should be good. So now we got this total product of every element. And so now we just go through and we could say for int I equals 0, I is less than array.length plus I. And now what we can do is we could say actually I got this a little backwards. Let's do it like this. So for our integer array, instead of initializing it to 1, we will initialize every spot to the product total instead of 1. And then I'm sort of working backwards from that value. I'm just going to divide 1, whatever the current array value is in the position in products. So we could say products I, keep forgetting to blow this up, products I, divide equals array I. Right? Isn't that the same thing as before? We multiplied by every other value. And so you could think of it as initially I multiplied by every other value, but I also included the one I was supposed to exclude. And then the idea is I come through the whole collection again and I correct that and exclude. By dividing out the current value, I'm sort of excluding it. So it's just another way of looking at the problem. But the difference with this is that instead of n squared, I'm just going through the array once, but I am going through the array once to aggregate, right? When I'm calculating that product total, I had to go through each element and multiply them together. So I'm still going through it twice, but that's better than, n squared, right? So something like this could do it. Let's back out. Let me see what I messed up here. Okay, definitely what I do, plus I, prod total, will repeat. We went through array.length, and we said products I divide equals array I return products. Values different index 0, expected 20, but was 0. Okay. Then we got oh wait, I think I did get I even warned against doing this, so okay, I figured out what I did wrong. Let's go to the docs. Clearly I should have been checking it. Let's go C# enumerable repeat. I think I mixed up the order of those. So parameters are the element and then the count. What did I do? I did the count and then the element, so I completely got these backwards. So yeah, that would definitely cause some trouble. Let's try this again. Okay, good. So hopefully you can appreciate that. It was supposed to be the element first and then the number of them. And instead, I had those reversed where it was doing the array length and the product total number of times. So yeah, not good. But anyways, we got there. Let me do this. So yeah, sometimes it pays to take a little bit more time to think about the problem if there's another way you can do it. If you don't have to keep going over the same values. If you catch yourself doing that, it's usually a sign that there's room for improvement. If you find that you're going over the same data many times, there's probably a better way to do it. So I think I'll leave mine like this. I'll go ahead and submit it that way. Collect those honor points. And yeah, look at other people. There's another person using aggregate. And yeah, this is nice. They just kept using link. I did it with a loop, right? But we know select is, kind of analogous to that. And they did the same thing, right? They just took the product and divided by the current value, which they called x. So yeah, same difference. Yep, you're seeing a lot of that aggregate select kind of thing going on. Someone made... See, I don't know why make a list just to return an array. I don't like that. But yeah, so even if there's stuff you're not learning, hopefully, you start seeing things that stick out at you, like, hey, that doesn't make sense. And then you can learn not to do that, and you can help other people when you see them doing it. But yeah, see what else you can learn. Otherwise, hit me up with those questions and comments. As usual, thanks for watching. Thanks for the likes and subs. I will see you in another video.